Well, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. So our lunch and learn for this month is Title VI and airport compliance. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Bruce Ransom, and I am the Airport Division Manager at Central Wyoming Regional Airport in Riverton. I also currently serve on the Wyoming Airports Coalition Board and also within the board on the Education Committee. It's the job of the Education Committee to kind of put together the lunch and learns and to pick topics that we feel are relevant and timely. And we definitely felt that the Title VI was a timely and relevant topic in that some of our airports have just completed our program. Some of them are currently completing a Title VI plan, and there's a number of airports that are going to be doing this shortly in the future. I completed our plan several months ago from my airport, and I certainly am no expert on Title VI, but thankfully we're going to be joined by our guest speaker who has a lot of experience with the Title VI program. And so I'd like to introduce Wayne Ryder. Wayne is an aviation planner for Ardora engineering firm. And Wayne and his team have completed a number of programs for airports, municipalities, port authorities. And Wayne has a very unique perspective. Wayne was also an airport manager and has his AAE certification, his ACE certification. So he understands the airport side of the compliance, but he also understands the federal side and how to formulate these plans. So I'm excited. I know that we're going to be probably learning a lot here. So we're going to turn this over to Wayne, and I would just ask that as we go forward with any type of questions, that we put them over in the chat. And when Wayne's finished with his presentation, we'll go ahead and answer them at that time. So Wayne, thank you for being here, and I'm going to turn the program over to you. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Bruce. And thank you to the coalition for inviting me to your lunch and learned. Good afternoon to most of you. Good morning to some of you. It's still morning for me. My name is Wayne Ryder, as was mentioned, and I'm a planner with Ardora, not an engineer. And I help airport sponsors with their titles or their civil rights compliance requirements. And at the end of today's discussion, you will know what your Title VI compliance requirements are, at least as we knew and understood them last year. So there's a little disclaimer in that these requirements may change at any time. So just keep that in mind. So before I get started, a little bit about me and my background. You've already gotten an introduction, but a little bit about how I got involved in this subject. Because I get asked, Wayne, how did you get roped into doing civil rights requirements? Well, I volunteered for it. And I have been with the company for about 5.5 years. And before I came to the company, I was working in airports for about 18 years. And I, like many of you, I wore many hats. And one of those hats was DBE liaison. And while I thought that I was pretty competent at airport subject matter, DBE was not one of them. When I would speak with the civil rights compliance specialists on the phone, they were speaking in a different language that I just didn't understand, and it was very frustrating. So I made it a point to, once I made the jump over to the consulting world, to learn DBE and become proficient at it so that I could provide it as a service, and because I knew it was needed and it would be appreciated. And so I did that, and then I learned ACDBE, and then that turned into Title VI, and which is fairly recent. That was last year. So that's how I got involved with this particular subject, and I like doing it. I enjoy doing it. So I volunteered for it, though, believe it or not. So I want to start out with this picture on the slide you see here. Normally, I would ask people what this is a picture of, but in this case, I'll just let you know. This is the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by President Johnson. And what that did is it set in motion the requirements that we're trying to comply with today. So, Civil Rights Act of 1964. When we talk about civil rights, it's usually a very broad topic and can be dependent on the context. So for today's discussion, civil rights is referring to the Office of Civil Rights with the FAA. And this is, you'll see abbreviated as ACR. There's also a reference to the Department of Civil Rights within the US Department of Transportation. And in those cases, you'll see it abbreviated DOCR. But for today's purposes, today's context, when I say civil rights, I'm referring to the Office of Civil Rights of the FAA. Civil rights is separate from the Office of Airports, which you and I usually deal with on a regular basis. That's their abbreviated ARP. So civil rights does not report to airports. Airports does not report to civil rights. But my observation and my observation only is that, at least through last year, civil rights had a higher status than airports, which means that if civil rights were to tell airports to stop payment on a grant because the airport was not in compliance with their civil rights requirements, airports would stop payment and there would be no pushback, there would be no questioning. Now, both airports and civil rights are part of the FAA, which is primarily a safety organization. But how civil rights and airports achieve safety is a different pathway. So, for example, if you were to still be able to find the presentations that civil rights put on historically, you would find that there's a tagline that they used, and that is achieving safety through diversity. So there was a nod to the FAA's overall mission of safety, but the pathway was through diversity. Most of those slides, if not all of them, have been removed from the civil rights website, so you may not see those. Airports, on the other hand, I have not found any consistent tagline that they've used historically, so I made one up for them: achieving safety through design standards. So they're both pulling in the direction of safety, but their pathway is different. Both civil rights and airports impose their compliance through the grant assurances. The grant assurances are, as most of you know, the strings that come attached with receiving grant funding. There's 39 of them. 2 of them are related to civil rights, which means that your civil rights compliance that we're talking about today is, it applies to airports that receive FAA grants. As I mentioned, there's 2 grant assurances for civil rights. The first one is number 30, and number 30 is related to compliance with 49 CFR Part 21. Part 21 is connected to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, or just Title VI. And Title VI is related to the non-discrimination requirement in FAA programs. So per this grant assurance, as a recipient of FAA grants, you are to ensure that there's non-discrimination with respect to race, creed, color, national origin, sex, age, or disability, at least for programs where you're getting grant funding. This is not a new requirement. It has been around a while, and you're probably already in compliance with it since you do put non-discrimination clauses in your contracts and leases, or at least should be. So remember, this is grant assurance number 30 related to Part 21, which is Title VI, which is the non-discrimination requirement. And it's not a new requirement. The other grant assurance for civil rights is number 37, and its compliance with Part 26 and Part 23, which are the DBE and ACDBE programs. Both of those programs are similar but different, and we're not going to be talking about those today, but just know that there are those two grant assurances that are related to civil rights. So let's get into the Title VI compliance requirements, at least the new requirements, because that's what we're really talking about here. Part 21 was implemented by a Department of Transportation order in 2021. So if this is the new requirements we're talking about, it's in 2021, it's not that long ago, so it's very new. And what that did is this order set in motion this FAA rollout for their compliance schedule. And it started in FY 2023 with the large and medium hub airports, followed by the small and non-hub primary airports in FY 24. And this is probably what caught many of you, or at least some of you, off guard last year when you got your Dear Airport sponsor letter saying that you needed to be in compliance with the new Title VI compliance requirements. FY25 is for state DOTs that act as airport sponsors or get federal funding for state system plans, block grant states, non-primary commercials, and GA relievers. Probably doesn't apply to many of you. And then FY26 is the rest of the general aviation airports. And I suspect this is why we're having this discussion today and why many of you may be on this call is because of this possibility, the GA airport requirement. And there are three requirements from this DOT order. There is a Title VI pre-grant award checklist, which is a standard FAA form. You have a Title VI program plan, and then a community participation plan, or a CPP. There's three requirements. And it was started by this FAA or this DOT order in 2021. So let's talk about each one of these three requirements. We'll start with the checklist. Now, as I mentioned, it is a standard FAA form. You can download it. If you push, at least I have it on the screen here. If you click that link, it'll take you to a page where you can download this form, standard FAA form. Nothing complicated about it. And it asks you a series of questions, and it's either yes or no. And there's a block there for to make comments. So you just answer the questions such as, do you have an approved Title VI plan? Do you have an approved community participation plan? Do you collect demographic information? And so on and so forth. You answer these questions truthfully. If you do not have an approved Title VI plan, don't say yes. But you go through it, and some of the questions actually default to a yes if you're doing your due diligence. But once you complete this checklist, it gets submitted with your grant application. So every time you submit a grant application, this checklist gets added to the packet. And that's pretty much it. It really takes less than 10 minutes to fill out. It's not a complicated one, but it just adds more to your grant applications. The second requirement is the Title VI program plan. And this is where the meat of your requirements rests. And like if you're taking a test in college, a math test, where you just answer the question with a number, they're not going to give you full credit if you just give the answer. In order to get full credit, you need to show your work. And in order to get full credit, you've got to show your work in the Title VI plan. So what this is it provides the detailed information that you answered in the checklist. It is structured after an FAA template that you can download. And there's a link on the screen. And if you click that link, it takes you, if it gets there, to this page here where you can just simply download a document. Pretty easy. And there's going to be a recurring theme here about templates. You should use the template. If you have no place to start, or if you're doing it yourself, or you hire a consultant to do it, start with the template. It starts with a policy statement that is signed by a high-ranking official within your organization. And it is also where you designate your Title VI coordinator. This is a requirement. You have to have a Title VI coordinator, and this will be the person who oversees your Title VI program and will be the liaison with civil rights staff, and will also be the person who does any investigations for Title VI complaints. The template has 13 sections, so the plan that you put together and submit should have 13 sections. And much of what goes into this plan requires quite a bit of research and data collection. It's very time consuming, actually. Much of that information is listed on the screen. If you're having a consultant do this work, that consultant will probably be asking you questions related to this. It's all part of the research and data collection process. And some of this information includes the support staff for the Title VI coordinator. If you're a very small organization, maybe there is no support staff. Any pending grants you may have, and a pending grant for the purposes of this is a grant that's been applied for but has been awarded yet. Then you have demographic information, upcoming projects, because that is what could be the potential impacts to the community, what sort of LEP and translation services you have, and we'll get more into LEP, public transportation that you may have to and from the airport, whatever minority outreach efforts you engage in, and then notices and a complaint section. As I said, it's quite a bit of effort that goes into this, whether you do it yourself or you have a consultant do it. We just happen to specialize in data and research. And once you're all done with this, then it gets updated every 3 years. So it's not a one-time deal. It is the gift that keeps on giving, right? So every 3 years, just like DBE and ACDBE, you get to review your plan and make updates. The third requirement is the community participation plan. It's the CPP. Guess what? It's formatted after another template. And if you click that link that's on the screen, you go, hopefully you'll find it quickly. Yeah, you get that. And this is something that I wanted to mention. I pulled this screen up especially because at the beginning of the discussion, I mentioned this whole program may change at any time. Just yesterday, this page had links. And as of today, they don't have links. So it's something you have to pay attention to. So who knows what's going to happen. Okay, so back to the slide. So the community participation plan does have some sections. It's laid out using the template. There's an admin section where you name the responsible officials. One of those will be the Title VI coordinator. You identify affected communities. This is a defined term, or I may refer to it also as the service area. Affected communities being persons likely to be directly or indirectly impacted by a program receiving federal assistance. This affected community may or may not coincide with your operational service area or the catchment area, but this is directly related to impacts from federally funded programs. And in this section, you identify minority, underserved population, low income, and LEP populations. This is data that you get directly from the US Census Bureau. They're hard numbers. You also identify your outreach and engagement measures, which would be your communications platforms, being print or digital media, what sort of language accessibility measures you may have, which would include translation and interpretation services if you have them, translation being conversion of written documents, and interpretation services being conversion of spoken language in real time. And then it has a section for record keeping and reporting. Now, the Title VI plan and the community participation plan are two separate documents that get submitted separately to FAA Civil Rights through their portal, the Civil Rights Connect portal. You can't just send an email to them. You have to submit it through their portal. They get submitted separately, reviewed separately, and approved separately. The CPP does not have a place for a signature for high-ranking officials within the organization. It's a shorter document, so you're more likely to get that reviewed and approved before the Title VI plan gets approved. But just remember, the CPP and the Title VI plan are submitted separately and reviewed and approved separately, and it has to go through the FAA's portal. So there's a couple of areas within the plan that require a little extra attention. I've mentioned LEP already. LEP stands for Limited English Proficiency, and this is section 8 of the template. So if you're following the template, which you should be doing, it will be this LEP plan, or in some cases, it may be called the Language Accessibility Plan. And the purpose of this section is written on the screen, but the purpose of this section is to provide meaningful access to information and services that the airport provides, especially for people who do not speak English as their first language. We would call that a LEP person. For example, if you're one of your services at your commercial airport, you want to get people from the streets to the terminal, through the terminal, and onto an airplane. And if they are someone who has difficulty with English, you want to make sure that you assist them, and that this is where you would describe that process. An LEP person, that is a definition, and I've already spoken a little bit about it, but that's a person who does not speak English as their primary language and has limited ability to read, speak, write, or understand English. So in order to complete this section, you have to do a self-assessment to determine the type and extent of translation services that you may need or that you should provide. So you do this self-assessment. It's called a 4-factor analysis. So you run through these items. You first determine the number of LEP persons in the service area. And this is hard numbers, and you get it straight from the US Census Bureau. Then you look at the frequency of contact that your staff has with people using the airport. And it's rather subjective, but you would just go to your own staff and see, how often do you make contact with LEP persons? Is it daily, weekly, monthly, longer? Some of you, it may be once every 6 months. Then you determine the importance of the services that are provided. For our purposes, transportation is considered an important service, and aviation is a part of the transportation. That also includes ground transportation. Emergency services are also important. For example, if you have a terminal evacuation plan, you would want to make sure that that gets translated so that people who are an LEP person could be able to get out of the terminal should there be an emergency. And then you identify the resources you have available, such as translation services, what sort of notices you have, if you have any bilingual staff available. There's another thing called iSpeak cards, which is something that you can download, where if you have somebody approach your information desk, for example, and they're an LEP person, and you have a person behind your desk who doesn't speak any other foreign language, they can pull this up and point to what language they speak, and at least you can get started on how you would provide assistance to them. So you go through this self-assessment, this 4-factor analysis, and you've determined the number of LEP persons in your service area, whether it's 100, 1,000, or 10,000. That number doesn't really help you very much unless you have a threshold. And that threshold is called, there's actually a name for it, a LEP safe harbor. And it's a definition where you should provide written translation of vital documents, another defined term, for each LEP language that constitutes 5% or 1,000 of the population served by the airport. So if you have identified in your 4-factor analysis 500 people in your service area, you may not really need to provide translation services. You still could if you want to. But if you have over 1,000, that it's something that you really would be expected to provide, should it be requested. Vital documents is another defined term, would be those documents that are critical to access the services or benefits that the airport provides. And this could be applicable to staff as well as customers. And in some examples of those vital documents that you should consider translation services for are public notices, safety information, outreach materials, your unlawful discrimination posters, and your complaint forms. So remember, complaint forms are definitely a vital document. I might also add some vital documents could also be your primary management and compliance documents, such as your minimum standards, your rules and regulations, even your master plan, perhaps. And now you might think, well, Wayne, you just made me a master plan that's 1,000 pages long. Are you really expecting me to translate the whole thing? That's a hypothetical, because I would never intentionally try to make a master plan 1,000 pages long. But in the case of long documents, you would not be expected to translate the entire thing, only those sections that would be considered vital. For example, in a master plan, you put together a CIP, proposed projects where you're expecting to get FAA funding for. So that might be considered a vital section within the master plan. And you should consider providing translation services to that section of the master plan, but not necessarily the entire thing. Another section within the plan that gets a little extra attention would be the complaint section. And if you're following the template, which you should be, it will be section 13 of the plan. And if you have no idea where to start, that's okay. It's all spelled out in the template. If you follow the template, you should still tailor it to what your organization uses or what the circumstances are locally, but still you have language that you can fall back on, and it's provided in the template. And this complaint section applies to Title VI complaints against the sponsor and the sponsor's contractors, subcontractors, tenants, lessees, concessions. It would not apply to cases where there's a complaint, a Title VI complaint made against TSA or the airlines. That would follow a separate process. And more or less, the complaint process follows this 5-step plan. It's pretty straightforward, actually. You receive the complaint in writing. It gets recorded or documented and then routed to the Title VI coordinator, who will then forward it to FAA Civil Rights. The coordinator then does a prompt investigation of the complaint and then issues a report and a response to the complainant, along with some language for how to appeal. And then there's a mitigation part where you describe how you will avoid or try to avoid future complaints. And then there's a disclosure as well about how there is a prohibition on intimidation and retaliation. That would be like a whistleblower protection. Pretty straightforward. So please use the template if you have no idea where to start. Part of the plan includes an example of your complaint form. It's in the appendix, and it should also be, since it's considered a vital document, it should be translated to LAP persons that you have identified previously. And if you have no idea where to start for that, there is a template that you can download for that as well. So here is what it looks like, a sample complaint format. You can use it or you do not have to, but it's very fortunate that they provide that as a template. Okay, so let's just say you get this Dear Airport sponsor letter next year. You're a GA airport operator and you get the letter. What do? Well, don't panic. That's the last thing you do. You don't need to panic, because having gone through this training, you now know what exactly to do. It's not a difficult process. You don't need to stress it. But you should at least start early. You don't want to wait until 2 weeks before the deadline. So because, as I mentioned, there is quite a bit of data and research collection that has to be done, and then compiling it into the document. So start early. use the templates that have been provided by the FAA. If you do that, your chance of getting them reviewed and approved are much better. If you do it yourself, use the template. If you hire a consultant, we're going to start with the template. Something that's separate but still recommended is to consider using a translation function for your websites. There's a little widget here on the screen that's an example. It's just a good operating practice anyway. And if you don't have that service, you can Google it actually. If you Google translation widget for developers form, it will take you to a page. I pulled it up here on the screen here. You can get started and try to get this to your web developer. These are available to government entities and nonprofit. There you go. So you should be able to get this widget for your website pretty easily. Highly recommended. And then if anything else fails, ask civil rights staff for assistance. The Title VI staff with the FAA, at least my experience with them, is they've been responsive and they've been helpful. So don't be afraid to ask them for assistance. So who would you ask? I have a couple of contacts here. I'm hoping they're still the points of contacts, but I don't know. So Tanya would be the first person to reach out to. She would be the regional representative for Title VI issues. And then you can reach out to Cherry. She's the national compliance specialist. And with that, I am open to questions. So let's see here. Hi, Bruce.
Okay. Well, thank you, Wayne. That was extremely informative. It really was. Having gone through this program, like I said a few months ago, I still learned quite a bit from the presentation you made. Just kind of maybe jumping on just a little bit of some of the things that you said that I wanted to point out. One of the reasons that we did our program was we were under the false assumption we are owned by the city of Riverton, and Riverton just did a Title VI. So we thought that we were under that umbrella, and we were not. And so it put us, behind the 8 ball a little bit to get our program done on a timely manner. So I just wanted to mention that if you're owned by a city, you're owned by a municipality, this Title VI program is for airports. And so you will have to create, the program for your airport specifically. And just a quick follow-up on that is these are very, very involved. Unless you're willing to take a really deep dive on census data and a really deep dive on the actual, federal regulations regarding this. They're very time consuming. My recommendation would certainly be to turn them over to a professional that can put these together. They are AIP eligible. And so, with that, just something to consider in the programs. So
yeah, thanks, Bruce. I did want to add, if you don't mind,
sure.
We are still considering them to be, I think the FAA still considers them to be AIP eligible.
Mm-hmm.
It's not mentioned specifically in the AIP handbook. And we were, I think, fortunate in the region that the FAA staff agreed to make it eligible and to include it in a construction project, right? But there's no guarantee it will always be AIP eligible. So it's just, and it may not be eligible in other regions. Fortunately, the FAA staff did agree to make it eligible this time around.
Okay, now thank you for clearing that up. I know, with my program, I probably had 60 to 70 hours into it, and the learning curve was huge. So I just wanted to throw that out there. If you have the time, that's great. If not, then consider getting professional help. And obviously, we're going to open it up for any questions that anybody might have. Feel free.
Yeah, while that's being compiled, there was a little bit of sticker shock when we put a fee proposal attached to these for a consultant doing it. And I know we got some pushback a little bit, but it was because they just don't understand how much time and energy gets put into these. It's very time consuming. It's not difficult necessarily, just time consuming. And time, if you're an airport operator, you just may not have time. And if you pay a consultant to do it, it costs money. But we've been hitting our targets on what our estimates were. So it's just worth putting it out there.
Here, well, Wayne, I don't see any questions coming forward right now. So if there are no more questions, I really want to thank you for your time and your information. And as always, to the participants, these lunch and learns are recorded. And so you can always go back and replay this, use these as a resource. So is there any other questions before we sign off?
Bruce,
And Bruce,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Wayne.
I do want to add too, for those, if you're an accredited airport executive and you're either on the call or you watch it later, this does qualify for the DEI credits that AAAE still has, as long as those requirements remain in place.
Devin, did you have a question?
Not a question. I was just going to, before we sign off, have a few announcements is all.
Okay.
So if there's no other questions, Bruce, really appreciate once again the education committee stepping up and putting on these webinars. Wayne, really appreciate your help. Touche on everything, or not touche, ditto on everything that Bruce said. Wayne worked with us on our Title VI plan as well. And we're still waiting to hear from the FAA whether or not it's approved, but it's really appreciate the help that Wayne provided in working through that. So with that, a couple things. Keep an eye out on your inboxes, folks. Over the next day or so, you'll be receiving an email from me with information regarding your membership for 2025. We are finally ready to launch our new membership platform, so we're excited to get that out to folks. So be looking for that over the next day or so. And then also be looking out for some preliminary information on our conference. The conference planning committee has been working, and we're working on fine-tuning the agenda. We picked topics based on all of your feedback over the last couple weeks. And so we're working on all of the final details here, but we can start getting hotel rooms booked. And we can really start working towards the things like registration and sponsorship. So be keeping your eyes out for those emails in the coming weeks as well. And then the final thing I'll tell you is the legislative session is still ongoing. I know a lot of us are burnt out over what has occurred over the last several weeks. But it goes into next week. So please keep your eyes out for what's happening. There could still be calls to action between now and the end of the session. And I know we'll work with the education committee to do a webinar post-session to talk about what happened during this session that has an impact on airports. But we're still working that. And then your legislative affairs committee is arriving back in Wyoming today. I came back a day early. But the team's arriving back in Wyoming today after a visit to Washington, D.C. to meet with our congressional delegation. Had some great meetings with all three of them and their staffers, and we'll look forward to sharing updates with membership on that as well. So a lot of activity happening behind the scenes, but be looking for updates coming your way shortly. And Wayne, looks like there's a question that did just pop up about can you share the anticipated cost to prepare a basic Title VI plan, community participation plan? I'll let you maybe answer that, Wayne. I'm sure Bruce and I could share what we paid, but you're probably more equipped to answer what those costs look like.
Yeah, it's for a basic one, it's about $40,000.
And that's right in line with what we paid for ours. So,
Okay.
With that, if there's any other questions, feel free to let them share them via email. Bruce mentioned earlier that we do record these. Once you sign up as a member of the coalition, you'll find them on the website. It's behind a paywall for the recordings. So to be able to access recordings of these, it is behind the membership paywall. But otherwise, once you sign up as a member on the new platform, you'll have access to it right on our website. So, and with that, once again, thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Wayne. Hope everybody enjoys some beautiful weather. It appears to be hitting Wyoming this week. Otherwise, have a safe rest of the week and a great weekend.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.